physical.
Well, friends, I'll take this opportunity to jump in and mute everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see you all, and welcome to another fun-filled episode of Torah study here at Temple Bat Yam, online all around the world in various stages of pandemic lockdown or otherwise. Great to see you all. We have Jimmy from Vietnam. We have a bunch of people from around the OC. We have Leslie White coming to us from Idaho. Lori Bassman's here, or Harley, or both. Not sure which side of the country they're in right now. Bassman's, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Where are you guys?
I'm here in Orange County. Lori is in Montana at a yoga retreat,
Oh, wow.
meditation retreat, and she returns today.
Fantastic. Well, all over the place. And they just had a celebration. So Mazel Tov for your recent celebration. Talking about celebrations, celebrating her big double high birthday, Ellen Phillips. Happy birthday, Ellen. Double high. How does it feel?
Just feels terrific. It almost feels like I'm actually in my late 60s, but.
Don't look a day over 37.
Thank you so much.
On the other hand, David Zarno, into his 120th year. No, how are you, David? All the
Doing
way
well.
down in San Diego County.
Yeah, we love it. We're just back from visiting Zach and Alex, our eldest, in Middletown, Connecticut, and just loved it there, but happy to be back as well.
Is Middletown, Connecticut, it's just to the west of Easttown and just to the east of Westtown?
Everything is like that.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. I thought I knew where that was. What's that?
Went to the Torah synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island. Got to sing there too. It was fabulous. Just an
Amazing.
amazing place.
Fantastic. Well, quick whip around. Anyone have something to dedicate this Torah study to? I know we're thinking about those who died as a result of the terrorist attack at the Kabul airport, thinking of all of those in harm's way and trying to get out, trying to save people from the clutches of the Taliban, and so on and so forth. Other dedications. Scotty.
Boker Tov.
Hey,
I just wanted to share that we had a Shabbat dinner last night as a family, and Rabbi, you've had a terrific influence on Ashley and Dylan, who are going to be married October 30th, and they want to do a regular Shabbat evening, and it was really lovely. It happened to be, we were with Elon Gold last night and Nancy Spielberg, who's amazing. So I'm thinking 2022 distinguished speaker event with Nancy Spielberg. So we'll work on that.
Does she still run that dairy restaurant, the Milky Way? Or is that closed down?
Nancy Spielberg?
Is Nancy Spielberg the mother of Steven Spielberg?
The sister.
Oh, it's
yeah. Maybe Leslie White will know more. She's doing a documentary on Israel, a terrorist attack, and
oh wow,
very, very involved. And she was speaker at Women in Voices, and so yeah, maybe you can get Leslie to chime in. But she'd be a remarkable speaker to have.
Yeah, she's great, and she produces and directs. So and funny enough, like at that speaking engagement, Scott, that you were talking about, she said that Stephen had never mentioned the Holocaust at all growing up. I mean, they never talked about it. So when he made Schindler's List, it was shocking. But yeah, she's a fantastic speaker. Yeah.
I just want to fact check. Am I making things up, or does their mother run a dairy kosher restaurant named the Milky Way? Okay.
We don't know about the mom. She's the sister.
Okay. All right. I've got lots of people with their hands up. Let's go through. Kathy.
I'd like to dedicate this to Father Thomas McKenzie, an Episcopal priest in Tennessee. He was driving his son to university as a freshman, and they were in a car accident hitting a tractor trailer and died. He was going to be 50 and take his wife to Paris for that and go on a pilgrimage and things like that. A very prominent, well-known Episcopal priest that a lot of people loved learning what Episcopal is about from.
Oh, what a tragedy. Thank you for sharing that. May his memory be a blessing. Thank you. Muriel.
Yes, I'd like to dedicate this to your lovely wife, Rabbi Raina Gewurz, who led an absolutely wonderful service at our Reformed Temple of Laguna Woods last night with a very interesting and challenging sermon. So it was excellent.
Lovely. Thank you. She had a ball. Thank you. Mark, then Linda, and then Bobby.
Thank you. I just want to dedicate this to my late brother, John, and because it's his yard site at this time.
Thank you. Linda.
So yes, his mother does still own the restaurant. She was honored as Mother of the Year for Cedar Sinai Helping Hand Mother's Day Luncheon many years ago. She was like 2 feet tall. She's just this tiny little woman. And Steven Spielberg was there as the son, and he had his little hand video camera. Do you remember? Mm-hmm. And he was just taking pictures of his mother, and he was just like beaming and proud. So yes, she does. I just looked it up. It's still there. Whether she owns it or not, I don't know, but it is still there in LA on Pico.
Oh, that is priceless.
It was really very charming. So we got to meet him, but she was adorable and cute.
Priceless. Maybe we'll do a synagogue trip up there.
Yeah.
And Bobby, you just need to accept the request to unmute.
Thank you. I'd like to dedicate this study in thanks for my recent trip to New York, which Jessica took us on, where I got to meet and see relatives that I haven't seen in over 50 years. And it was really a blessing for me.
Wow. Wow, wow. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you're able to make that trip.
I was.
Fantastic.
Thanks.
Okay. Did I get everyone? Oh, Rhoda with the...
My daughter Janice worked as a waitress at the Milky Way. And
really?
when she was a student at UCLA, and she was very good friends with Leah. And she would bring Leah a book every week because Leah was husband after Mr. Spielberg was Orthodox, and she did not want to go to temple, but she wanted a good book every week, and so Janice would bring her one.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
what a great story. Just shows you how connected everyone is to all these different things. I just want to notice that we have several people enjoying bananas this morning. Bananas are very good for your health. I usually put them in smoothies, frozen, and add a little protein powder. But Linda doesn't like bananas. Rob doesn't like, what does that cardiologist say? Lots of potassium, right? No, don't have too many.
But please remember, bananas have a lot of calories. And for those people that need to take potassium, bananas won't make it up because one banana only has 2 milliequivalents and one potassium pill is either 10 or 20. So they're good, but they also contain calories.
Yes, they're nature's junk food, but tasty nonetheless. And I bet, all right, that'll be another tangent, but some people have already gone for a half marathon today and deserve a little calorie, so. All right, let's say our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. David Zano can make me giggle even on the chat line. Today's Torah portion, Ki Tavo, covers a lot of territory. It could send us down the rabbit warren of divine reward and punishment that we theme that we return to not infrequently. But that's not the direction I want to take us. Instead, I want to zero in on one particular topic that we haven't addressed for quite some time. And it is brought to us fairly early in the Parsha. For those who are, look at that, Kathy Hayes just posted all the page numbers. That's the beginning of the Torah portion. We're actually going to pick up a little bit into it. So we're looking for Deuteronomy 26, verse 16. In the newest version, it's page 1351. This is the newest version of Plout, which I will show everyone in just a moment. We're on page 1351. Remember, we are in the section of the Torah, book of Deuteronomy, in which Moshe is giving his final words before the people enter the land of Israel, the promised land, which he, of course, will not make it to. And in verse 16, we read the following. Can everyone see it on the screen? Yes, we can. Okay. The eternal your God commands you this day to observe these laws and rules, observe them faithfully with all your heart and soul. You have affirmed this day that the eternal is your God, in whose ways you will walk, whose laws and commandments and rules you will observe, and whom you will obey. And the eternal has affirmed this day that you are, as promised, God's treasured people. God's treasured people. And in the Hebrew, verse 18, Vadonai he'emircha hayom, and God says to you, or affirms verbally, lihiot lo, that you shall be to God, la'am segula, a treasured people. Am, that's nation, like Am Israel, Am Israel, Am Israel Chai. The nation of Israel lives. Segula, treasured. Am segula, treasured people. Today, we are going to talk about this notion of being a treasured people, of being the chosen people. And I'm sure we know and agree that that is somewhat of a double-edged sword. Chosen people, treasured people. Let's take a look. We have a little sheet courtesy of Safaria. Let's take a look at that. Everyone seeing treasured nation status? Okay. Yiddish proverb says, "Dear God, you have chosen us from among the nations." Why did you have to pick on the Jews? We see that this notion of chosenness can be traced back to the earliest days of our ancestors. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, this is from Genesis chapter 12. Lech lecha. We're about to be back there in just a few short weeks. God said to Abram, go forth from your native land and from your father's house to a land that I will show you. I'll make of you a great nation. There it's Goy Gadol, a great nation. So the word Goy that we often hear used in a defamatory way to refer to non-Jews simply means nation. And so in biblical Hebrew, it doesn't have any of those connotations. It's like the word nation. Am or Goy, Goy Gadol, a great nation, and I will bless you, I will make your name great, and you shall be a blessing, which Debbie Friedman took and turned into a very pretty song. And David Zano is going to sing it for us. David.
Well, I could, but I won't. I like the word, I like your distinction of the word goy, and I think it's very important to distinguish it from am. And here we have a situation before we're Jewish. We're a people, but goy to me means borders, language, culture. And so we distinguish other nations with borders, language, culture as something foreign to us, perhaps pagan even. And so we're starting to separate ourselves as worthy of God's attention versus the ultimate sin of worshiping pagans or idols. And so when we say it's one thing to have a collective group of people, but it's another thing to say goy. That's a real sense of total culture and other distinguishing characteristics.
Thank you. Thank you. So nation, people, state, there's different, these are synonyms, but they have slightly different connotations. Then we see chapter 18, verse 19 of Bereshit, for I have singled him out that he may instruct his children and his posterity to keep the way of Adonai by doing what is just and right. What is introduced here? Still early on, singled out, right? What is the nature of the singling out? That he may instruct his children. Tzaveh et banav et beito acharav v'shamru derech Adonai la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. Steve Edwards.
So we're being singled out for a burden. We're not being singled out because of our unique merit. And of course, that gets lost in the conversation with the Goyen all the time.
Right. So right up front, even in the early days of Genesis, we're told it's not you being singled out because you have something special. You are singled out in order to do something special. And in this case, we see it's to teach subsequent generations, right? Instruct. In fact, yitzaveh is to command children. Et banav et beito, his household, after him. V'shamu derech Adonai, to follow or to guard the way of Adonai, la'asot tzedakah, to do righteous acts, u'mishpat, and legal actions. Okay, Jimmy.
The previous statement was a collective use. If you read this literally, it says, for I have singled him out. Perhaps an interpretation could be the fact that Hashem is picking leaders such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, that he may instruct the children.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just giving it another interpretation on the word him.
Well, at this stage, we are talking about the very much the family tree part of Jewish history. Of course, as we saw in Deuteronomy, this extends to the nation. And so while
but this is previous to that.
Yeah, this is previous to that. So great point. Ellen's iPad. We don't see you, Ellen, but we hear
I'm
you.
sorry. Big night last night at Temple.
Okay.
It sounds as though you're alluding to the fact that God offered this to the Jews only. God offered it to everybody and they all turned it down. It's because the Jews accepted the challenge that they were chosen.
You're alluding to a wonderful midrash, a rabbinic fable that says that when the children of Israel were given the opportunity to receive the Torah, they weren't the first people.
That's right.
God went around offering the Torah to lots of different groups, and each one turned it down because they didn't like one or the other clause in it. But the story ends in a kind of ambivalent way, because it says that the children of Israel chose to accept the Torah, when Mount Sinai was held over our heads, and we were told, take it or the mountain's going to be dropped on you. So it's kind of interesting. But yes, that is definitely a midrash. And as we'll see, it's interesting to ponder the extent to which these stories are trying to solve a problem that comes up from this versus tell us anything truthful about the history. Thank you for pointing out. It's a wonderful midrash. Holly.
Hello, good morning. You know, I'll zoom to 30,000 feet for a second. You know, I'm always kind of wondering, like, what is the core, the seed, the genesis of why there's anti-Semitism in the world, and why the Jews? And I think, well, is it possible that it could be the way we dress, or the way they dressed X thousand years ago? And for instance, right now, women in hijabs are kind of, you know, bothersome. And even in France, you can't even wear it to school. Truth be told, you know, the black hats in Williamsburg, I would not call the most attractive people, and they look very strange. So it's the way we dress. It could be practices, how we conducted ourselves 2,000 years ago. And presently now, if you look at the Amish or a Christian Scientist, we don't hold them in high regard when they get appendicitis and die in the house, or they keep their kids for medical care. That could be a reason. Or it could be this whole concept of we're the chosen people, and advertising this idea that we think we're above everybody else. Is that a good reason? And so when I read this over here, I'm kind of wondering, is this how we got into a pickle, you know, X thousand years ago? And so that's my 2 cents.
I don't think you're alone in attributing some measure of anti-Semitism to this notion of chosenness. Of course, it's hard to say causality or association, which one came first. But we know that anti-Semites occasionally take great glee in throwing in our faces this notion of chosenness, and use it with irony or use it with hatred. And so whether it caused the hatred or whether it's being used by those who hate us as a convenient foil, it's certainly something that comes up in anti-Semitism. And that's part of the reason why we're talking about it. So excellent point. Thank you, Holly. Dr. Rob.
Well, just on Holly's point, I think that's not necessarily the major reason why there's anti-Semitism. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but the other one is the idea that people feel responsible for the death of Jesus. And I think, not knowing a lot of history or going into detail, but I think people walk around that where the so-called Christ killers. And I think that's actually what stimulated so much anti-Semitism, especially in the Middle Ages. Not so much who were chosen, but what, you know, about the Last Supper and how we might be implicated in Jesus' death. I think that's the misunderstanding that's caused so much anti-Semitism.
So I want to be careful not to go too far off on this tangent of anti-Semitism, because that is a whole topic in and of itself, all the different strands and origins of anti-Semitism, and the chosenness issue certainly is a kind of Venn diagram overlap with that discussion. I want to point out in the chat, someone mentioned the Pope has made some kind of regressive statements, having Catholic Church having come a long way. He has been asked to apologize for some things he said, but absolutely, this question of chosenness is problematic to Christianity that views itself as superseding the Jewish people who failed in their quest to deserve their chosenness, and that becomes part of some forms of Christian anti-Semitism. Okay, we have lots of hands going up. I want to make sure that I'm not missing the people who haven't worked out how to press it. More and more people are learning how to do the hand raise. Just a reminder for those who haven't got it yet, where it says reactions, there is a raise hand bar at the bottom. You click on that and then I can see where the hands are raised. So if you've tried to do that and haven't been able to, Linda, were you raising your hand?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Okay.
I got it down into the chat, but I didn't quite get I get a thumbs up, but I don't seem to get the hand right. Okay.
Oh, you're on an iPad. Maybe that's why it might not be available on an iPad. I'm not sure.
I know from having experienced the chosen part, and I was really caught off guard and rather surprised that when my cousin married someone who wasn't Jewish, they confronted me with saying, oh, well, you're the chosen people, aren't you? Or you consider yourself the chosen people, don't you? And like, how dare us?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is often a cause of friction on the part of non-Jews, anti-Semites or not. That certainly is an issue. Muriel and Marion.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it comes from non-acceptance of Christ. That how could we not accept Christ? We were of his people and we're not accepting it. And you're supposed to be chosen. It's supposed to be going on with it. Why don't you accept what seems so obvious to Christian people? And I think that's the anger of unacceptance from the original people.
Yeah, absolutely. Marion.
I wanted to get back to the original text a little bit. To me, it's a contract, and it also expresses free will. The free will part, of course, is will you accept the contract? Not whether or not there's Mount Sinai over your head, but will you accept the contract forever for you and your children, generations? And apparently we accepted the contract. Since I was at Sinai, I accepted it too. And as a result, we have a price to pay. We have to follow certain rules. And if we don't, maybe that mountain will fall on us.
Absolutely. So this is not something that we get gratis. It's not something that we can take for granted, but rather it's something that requires of us fulfilling our side of the bargain.
It's not a gift.
Right. It's an opportunity to live up to. Lovely. So let's take a look at the next text, which is, we're jumping to the book of Exodus, chapter 19. You've seen what I did to the Egyptians, Atem ra'item asher asiti leMitzrayim, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. A lovely image of the Exodus. Now, therefore, if you will heed my voice and keep my covenant, again, this is conditional, as we were just talking about, then you shall be my own treasure from among all the peoples. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So this term that we came across in Deuteronomy, we see here in Exodus, Va'ata, and now im shamoa tishma'u, if you truly listen, b'koli, to my voice, God's voice, ushmartem et briti, and you safeguard my covenant, vahitem li, and you shall be to me, segula, treasured, mikol ha'amim, among all the nations, ki li kol ha'aretz, because all of the land is mine. Va'atem tihiyu li, and you shall be to me, mamlechet kohanim, a kingdom of priests, v'goy kadosh, and a holy nation, holy people. Steve Edwards.
So two things. One is, no one can be expected to observe all the commandments all of the time. So it's almost, if it's to be taken literally, it's almost setting us up for failure. And then the second thing is that it's unlike the rest of Deuteronomy. These verses are not saying, if you observe my commandments, the rain will come and you'll prosper and you'll be. It says, if you do these things, you will attain a certain status a holiness. And it's without, it's kind of a higher calling than this kind of, the other kind of the Deuteronomic covenant that you do these things and, you know, you'll prosper in the material world. So, which I don't know, I find that more interesting and more inspiring.
It is inspirational and aspirational in its direction compared with simply, you know, carrots and sticks. This is more than a carrot. This is an opportunity to transcend and be greater than our basest selves. So moving along to Deuteronomy and another text from Deuteronomy. Let's take a look here. So we're earlier in Deuteronomy than the current Torah portion. Ki am kadosh ata l'Adonai Elohecha, for you are a people consecrated, holy to your God. B'cha bachar, I chose you, or Adonai Elohecha chose you, lihyot lo la'am segula. God chose you to be a treasured people, mikol ha'amim, among all the nations, asher al pnei ha'adamah, that are on the face of the earth. Lo merubchem mikol ha'amim. It's not because you are the most numerous of the people that God set God's heart on you and chose you. Indeed, you are the smallest of peoples. But it was because God loved you and kept the oath God made to your ancestors that we read about earlier, that God freed you with a mighty hand and rescued you from the house of bondage, from the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. What factors are introduced here to this notion of chosenness that we haven't yet seen in the previous quotes? What attributes seem to be associated with chosenness here? Muriel.
Well, it seems that, and I say the author is recognizing that we are the smallest of peoples. In the earliest part, we were told that we were going to be a people that were more than the sands of the earth. So I think there's a little dichotomy there, or the recognition that we are the smallest peoples. Oops, what happened? And saying, but even so, look at us.
Nice. Thank you. Rob.
So you know, God keeps reminding us of what he did for us. And I think I keep thinking of the word of gratitude. I know so many of the prayers, we always thank God for keeping us healthy, and we get up in the morning and we thank God for another day. So is this all about trying to teach us that gratitude is very important as well? That gratitude is actually inherent in this contract?
I think one can learn that from this, certainly. I think that's an important lesson too. And of course, gratitude comes with its own benefits, right? So thank you. It's good for the heart, by the way, I hear cardiologists tell us. David Zarno, Kathy, then Linda.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think that this is telling me that we are a treasured people, which to me means that God has a soft spot for us. God loves all of his people, but he has a special place in his heart for us. It does not mean that we are better or worse than other people. We're just holy, meaning we're different. And God holds us to a higher standard. I think when the Torah, when God gives us the Torah, he means, okay, follow these divine decrees and laws. But and as Steve said, maybe we can't do them all, but it's our intent. We have to have the kavanah to do them. And I think the most important thing out of that I take away from this is that we do have a special spot in God's heart, but it creates the jealousy and the animosity and potentially the anti-Semitism because it's so misinterpreted that we think we're better. And I always bristle when I see some factions of our people thinking that they're better than other people. And that's where I draw the line. It's completely wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kathy, and then Linda.
I was particularly touched by the fact that God chose the Jewish people because he loved them. It wasn't for any reason on their anything alone. It was because he loved them, he chose them. And I think the part about being holy is that they are set apart, which means they are set apart to do God's will. And I think, and actually to be a light to the rest of the people of the world.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Linda.
I want to add to what Kathy said, that we are the people who believe in one God at a time when few nations did. And that we adhered to it. It wasn't just an overnight thing. And I think that's what put us in such good fare.
So it was not just that it was not a one-way relationship, or it's not a one-way relationship. This is an expression of our affection for God, the one and only God. Thank you, Linda. So what we see here, again, just to amplify what some have said, is this notion that God's chosen or God's choosing us doesn't come up because we're strong or numerous, but rather because God simply loves us. God had a promise to our ancestors that God is faithfully keeping. And in fact, in a world, even today, that seems to favor the powerful and the numerous, God chose a small people who were not mighty, who needed to be rescued from the power of the day of Pharaoh. And so there's something here about God's special soft spot for the underdog. A soft spot for the underdog. Now, I want to invoke the memory of our late spiritual leader, Rabbi Mark S. Miller, and all of you who knew him will know he was a very proud Cubs fan. And part of the endearing, there we go, Linda's got her Cubbies shirt on and Barbara's running to get hers. Part of the endearing quality, there we go, of the Cubs was that they were the perpetual losers. And even if you're not a Cubs fan, there is something heartwarming about seeing the Cubs do well or have a chance this year or that year. Leslie White is taking issue with this quite badly. We have a soft spot for underdogs. And perhaps at some level, God's choosing us is choosing the underdog. When we see a litter of puppies and one seems to be just kind of the runt of the litter, I don't know about you, but sometimes you kind of want to embrace that one and take care of them a little more. So what do you think of this idea? And it emerges from this passage of Deuteronomy we just read. Do you think there could be an argument to be said that actually God chose us precisely because we were kind of the underdogs? We were kind of not the strongest, not the, we were kind of the runt of the litter. Is there something to be said for that, or would you reject it? It's kind of the opposite idea, that there wasn't something special about us, but instead we were kind of the dunces. We were kind of, little pishy people in a corner somewhere, and God chose us. I saw Jean nodding no. Jean, what do you think?
Well, if you think back 5,000 years ago, there were not a lot of people around. There were, people were isolated. And so that just doesn't sit well with me. We turned out to, theoretically, before the millennium, before, going from BC to the Common Era, we were not that small. We were one of many. And And so I don't look at us as being that we were small. We were just one unique set of people in one small part of the world that, you know, somehow or other coalesced around the idea of a single God. And I think the smallness is a function of the history of what happened, because when you have way too many thou shalts and thou shalt nots, and you have to be circumcised, it's not exactly a rallying point for a lot of people.
Not to mention massacres and Holocaust.
Right. Yeah.
Bruce Winters.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Thank you. I don't like the word underdog. I don't think we were underdogs at all, but I think we were the people that would appreciate God's laws. And I think that, you know, it plays out later with the description of all these laws and all these all the blessings and curses in this Torah portion that says, well, these are the things you have to do. And sort of, you know, we would appreciate that. And I think one of the reasons that all the curses are in this Torah portion is so that we realize all the good things we have and that we would appreciate it more, maybe because there are few of us, or there were few of us, and there still are few of us. Rather than we were the underdogs. There are always people that think they're the underdogs, and everyone thinks they're the underdogs, even the biggest population.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Steve, Sloan.
Thank you. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Yeah, I could take exception to this notion of us as a chosen people, because it didn't start with us as a people. It started, God chose Abraham. He didn't choose us. We just happened to be the children of Abraham. And this was not the first time that God did the choosing. From the beginning, God was trying to make a particular kind of world. He started with Adam, and based on, the being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that didn't work out so well. And then he picked Noah, and who was, you know, a righteous man in his time, but he saved Noah amongst all of the peoples because God's creation, man, was not doing so well. He destroyed all of mankind except for Noah and his family, and then and that didn't work out so well. We had the Tower of Babel, we had got the Sodom and Gomorrah, and eventually God on his third try came down to Abraham. Lech lecha, and then he gave Abraham the supreme test with the Akedah, and that looked like it was going to work out, and eventually it did, but not without a whole number of things that happened along the way. When he finally came to the great grandchildren of Abraham, and then he asked us if we would accept the covenant.
Okay, so it's a whole process that goes back to the earliest choosing. Noah, you could even say Cain and Abel, and the choosing of the sacrifice, right. And so God is choosing all the time. Thank you, Steve Edwards. Oops, we're playing the mute unmute game. There we go.
All right. Okay. So back to your comment about did God choose us precisely because we were a relatively small and powerless nation? I think there's a lot of merit to that, because if he chose one of the great empires, it'd be really easy for the people at empire to start deciding that they were the source of their own greatness and not God. But if you choose a little nation like Israel that has been beset on all sides by enemies, that the only explanation for our continued existence and the greatness that we've delivered to the human race is our relationship with God.
Who was it that said, if you're wondering about miracles, just look at the Jewish people?
Yeah.
Still here? Someone said that. I don't remember who it is. Ellen, the birthday girl, Phillips.
I just keep thinking about, as Steve Sloan was kind of outlining how Hashem, picked this one and it didn't work out, and then pick that one and it didn't work out. And I think to me that's an interesting commentary on the nature of Hashem. Like Hashem, I'm guessing, could have just made it work out the first time. It kind of makes my brain hurt to think about it, but like, was Hashem kind of working things out too? It's unclear to me.
So it's in other words, the omniscient God should have known which people would have taken it, which gets into a whole other topic, which is free will and our ability to choose. We've been focusing on God's ability to choose here, but that's a great point. Thank you. Rob Greenfield.
I think it's a little chutzpahdik for us to sit and try to figure out why God chose us. It's like, it's none of our business. Like, just accept it. That we learned that in the book of Job. We can't figure it out, with our small brains. We don't know what this is all going to lead to. And actually, with respects, like, we're still living with the fact that there was the golden calf. But we always have to remember that even when God said he was with us and he was going to promise all these things, we went astray. And even today, we may not have a golden calf, but we have other idols that we worship, like money and power and things like that. So, like Steve said, he destroyed the world with Noah and the flood, but we better be careful because the world's not such a great place right now. And maybe, the human race is accelerating the possibility of destruction. So we got to be careful and just accept it. But I don't think we can try to figure out why God chose us. We just should accept it.
Thank you. Muriel, and then we're going to go back to some different texts.
I like the idea that we are set up in God's image. And if God made all these, let's say, tries and it didn't work, it kind of shows us that we as human beings, if we are in God's image, it's okay to make tries and they don't work, to find a way to improve ourselves so that things will work better. And I kind of like that somewhat.
Nice. Thank you, Muriel. So let's take a look. We've been looking at biblical references to this notion of chosenness. There are plenty of liturgical references that we employ on a regular basis. When we come up to do an aliyah for Torah, we say, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. This is the blessing before the reading of Torah. Praised are you, God, who chose us from among the nations and gave us God's Torah. In Reconstructionist Judaism, where this notion of chosenness is verboten, there is a change in wording in their prayer book from Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim to Asher Bachar Banu Im Kol Ha'amim. Im Kol Ha'amim. So it fits in terms of the number of syllables, and it sounds similar. It's a tiny change, but it means a lot. It's a tiny change in vocalization, but instead of saying Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim, who has chosen us from among the nations, it's chosen us with all the nations. In other words, this notion that every nation is chosen for their own particular purpose, rather than one only. We also say it at the Shabbat Kiddush. Ki vanu v'cha t'avotanu kidashta mikol ha'amim. You've chosen us and sanctified us out of all the nations and given us the Sabbath. Which raises the question, do we have, or is there a strain of a superiority complex that can emerge from this notion of chosenness? I think this has been alluded to already and may cause some anti-Semitism, this notion of Jewish superiority. In the Zohar, the mystical text, creatures that have a soul, that pertains to the Jews, for they are the children of God, and from God there came their holy souls. And the souls of other nations, from where do they come? Rabbi Elazar says that they have souls from the impure side, and therefore they are all impure, defiling anyone who comes near them. A little dirty secret of the Chabad movement is they really like this kind of thing. And you may know that Chabad is quite reluctant to officiate at conversions. And part of the reason for that is their notion that, non-Jews just don't have the holy soul that is required. And of course, they don't talk about that when they're handing out candlesticks and putting tefillin on people and being very welcoming at the front door. But behind it is some rather troubling, that's only one of the troubling aspects of their theology. There is a strain within certain writing that says that there are different levels of soul, that there's animal souls and Jewish souls, and somewhere in between, the Goyish souls. Very problematic, let me say it up front, but it exists in our tradition. And to put it into maybe a little bit of sociological context from the Encyclopedia Judaica on the topic of chosen people, the more extreme and exclusive interpretations of the doctrine of election among Jewish thinkers were partly the result of reaction to oppression by the non-Jewish world. The more the Jew was forced to close in on himself, to withdraw into the imposed confines of the ghetto, the more he tended to emphasize Israel's difference from the cruel Gentile without. This type of interpretation reaches its height in the Kabbalistic idea that whilst the souls of Israel stem from God, the souls of Gentiles are merely of base material. So as much as on its surface, it's obnoxious for us to think about these ideas coming from the Kabbalah, we can kind of understand if you are an oppressed minority, you could, as one way of coping with it, try to frame your opponents as being inhuman, barbarians, who are bent on evil. Mordechai Kaplan, of course, I've already referenced Reconstructionist Judaism, rejected the idea of chosenness. The idea of race or national superiority exercises divisive influences, generating suspicion and hatred, back to this notion of anti-Semitism. We cannot assume that Israel must at all times possess that spirit to a higher degree than other people. Thank God I had the courage to go through with the excision of such a cancerous growth from Jewish consciousness. So one of the major ideas in Reconstructionism was to reject this idea of chosenness, unless maybe framed as the idea that every group is chosen for their own purpose. Masha Falk in the 90s wrote, the idea of Israel as God's chosen people is a key concept in rabbinic Judaism. Yet it is particularly problematic for many Jews today in that it seems to fly in the face of monotheistic belief that all humanity is created in the divine image, and hence all humanity is equally loved and valued by God. I find it difficult to conceive of a feminist Judaism that would incorporate it in its teaching. The valuing of one people over and above others is all too analogous to the privileging of one sex over another. Okay. Don't show Ben Shapiro that. Alternative approaches. These are also part of our heritage. From Italy in the 15th, 16th century, and you shall be a treasure from among all peoples. Although all humans are important to me, you will be treasured from among them. So this notion that you can love all your children equally, but each in their own way. And those of us who have are blessed with children or grandchildren can know that you can love each child equally, but differently. Equally, but differently. Because mine is all the earth, and the difference between you exists in small or bigger amounts, despite the fact the whole earth is mine, since the righteous of the nations are important to me without a doubt. Okay, Wyman's raised hands, and then we're going to go to Jean and David Zarno.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that our folk culture among Jews is just soaked in this. You know, I remember my father-in-law, when one of our little grandchildren would sneeze, and he'd say, "A goy dir," or somebody has a goyish cup, and it's gotten into even our way we think of our Jews, of Gentiles, with contempt.
Well, there is a strain of kind of Jewish superiority and arrogance that can emerge from this, and I mean, I think we find it problematic, but it exists. And I'm sure we can all think of examples. So Gene, Spiritus, then David.
But perhaps what we were chosen for is to give the world the concept of one God, worshiping a single God. I mean, the reality is that this book was written by human beings dealing with the realities of where they were. But the chosenness was the concept of the Ten Commandments, that the world lived by a certain group of rights and treating your fellow man. I mean, as Reformed Jews, you know, when we look at all of the commandments, the do's and do nots, you know, it's really about being ethically and morally correct. And we don't have a lock on that. We're not the only people that are moral and ethical. And so from my perspective, I think, as Rabbi Miller used to say, we had it first. And maybe that gives you a little bit of specialness, that you were the first to really come to this concept. But in point of fact, what we've been asked to do is be morally and ethically chosen people. Everybody should be morally and ethically a chosen person to deal with their human fellow man. And our religion, in many ways, is multifactorial. I mean, there's Hasidic Judaism, there's universal, you know, there's us, there's the conservatives, there's people all over in between. And as I was marveled yesterday to find out that we have an atheistic rabbi who's the head of the rabbinics, is head of the School of Theology at Harvard. And why is he? Because he represents the 40% of people that want to be ethical that don't, at this point, have a specific religion. And so there we are.
Thank you, Jane. David, and then Steve, and then we're going to do some breakouts.
Well, what popped into my head was V'ahavta re'echa kamocha. In other words, love your neighbor as thyself. And the reason that popped into my head is because here we are with the challenge of a process to follow Torah the way God tells us to do to achieve morality and ethical behavior. In other words, other people believe in moral and ethics, but maybe only to the Noahide law level, where we have to go the full 613 measure. But the reason the love thy neighbor as thyself, I'm so grateful to be down in Carlsbad, where I don't have my former neighbors of 38 years. I had a Hilaria on the left and a Hilaria on the right. Couldn't agree on anything, couldn't move forward. But you know what? What I loved about them was they had the same aspirations that I had. They wanted to have a better life. They wanted to enjoy their family, be successful, be significant. Just that we couldn't see eye to eye on many things. But the point is that they're human beings. They have their aspirations, and I have to respect them. So in other words, I'm chosen to understand that. I'm chosen to respect other people in a certain process, halakha, okay? And not only maybe we disagreed on who is the, this or that in terms of religion, but nevertheless, I have to love them in a way because they are a fellow human being. So there was no superiority, which is different. And finally, the last point is I think it's a related rate problem between when you're Jewish, you have to be observable to the other peoples in order for the other people to see how Jews behave. At the same time, the other related rate is how much are you assimilating? And so I think we have to be mindful of that as well, that we adopt foreign aspects like falling in love. No, commit first, love second in Jewish tradition. This is the basis of arranged marriages and so on. But in the Western culture, we write songs about falling in love is wonderful. These kinds of things we've got to be very careful about to make sure that we explore keva, commitment, first, and the love from it. Just as an example, just like we have to commit to God and love God through our commitment to God.
Thank you, David. And as you can see, David is looking into a new career as a shadchan matchmaker, helping. So if anyone's looking for a match, just call David. Steve Edwards.
So I think it's kind of a false humility not to face our history. Our history is so different than anything else on the face of the earth, any other people on the face of the earth. I mean, we're this small people. Either we received from God or we wrote this book, which has been the most influential book that's ever in the existence of human beings, or at least in the Western part of the Western world. We've survived all these enemies that have stronger than us that have tried to kill us. Anytime even though we've been oppressed, anytime anybody gives us any degree of freedom, the slightest crack to wiggle through, we rise in society to the highest levels. There's something different going on here, and you can call it superior. I kind of back away from that word superiority because it is distasteful on some levels. But we're different, and we should face that and celebrate that. And the real thing, of course, is that not to have the hubris to say that it comes from our inherent merit. It comes from our relationship with God if we're successful in observing the commandments. But we are different, and in a lot of ways better than a lot of people that have come before us, and that still exists. So I think that's what pisses off the anti-Semites more, right? That we are doing better.
How many Nobel Prizes per capita? All the other things that we could look at. The ability of the state of Israel to prevail over much more numerous enemies and establish an economy and a society that is, compared to its neighbors, for sure, free and democratic, and so on and so forth. So what I want to do is read one more passage and then open it up for some small group discussion. In the Shema Journal in 2015, Aria Bernstein wrote, if we want to promote a non-chauvinistic sense of chosenness, we need to articulate that vision more clearly. Here's my stab at it. The association of chosenness with superiority reflects the faulty assumption that what I know is all there is to be known. That since I can testify to our chosenness because I remember Sinai, and since I have no personal knowledge of anyone else's chosenness, therefore we must be the only people to have been chosen. However, other peoples know things we don't know and have their own inspiration. Our covenant is no evidence of superiority. The reason non-Jews cannot testify to Sinai is simply they weren't there. I mean that poetically. I'll translate this into prose. Culture exists, and inheritors of a culture have something unique. Sorry, clicked on that. Something unique to contribute to the world. It would be spiritually colonialist for me to testify to any other people's chosenness or revelation. My role is to listen and take people at their word, at their testimony, to their experience, just as I hope they'll take my word and listen to my testimony of my experience. The character of this chosenness is our unique particular story. When we are called to the Torah, we say, praised are you, God, who chose us from among the nations by giving us the Torah. But all nations, all humanity are responsible for a universal ethics, as encapsulated by the 7 Noahide laws that ordain core guidelines of civilized human life. Every nation must sustain an ethical culture. As Jews, we must sustain the particular ethical culture shaped by having been slaves in Egypt, guided through the desert. Keep doing that. We are chosen to serve as we are, and it seems as though everyone else probably is too. So the question to ponder as we break out into groups for a few minutes and then come back to share a little bit, is this question of what is the nature of our chosenness? Is it an obsolete concept that had its role in the past and no longer has relevance? Is it true? What is the nature of the chosenness? Are we the only chosen people, or is each people chosen in their own way? And by the way, we are not simply Jewish. We are Jews who are in America. We are American Jews or Jewish Americans. And one of the ideas that is often heard in America is this notion that America is exceptional. Is America truly exceptional? What does that mean? And what is the relationship between the notion of Jewish chosenness and American exceptionalism? Are we as American Jews chosen and exceptional? What does this all mean? And what does it mean in terms of our responsibility to each other and to the world around us? So let's take a few minutes to Jim's signing off. It's late there in Vietnam. Be well, sleep tight. Shavua tov to Jim. Let's take a few minutes and talk about this topic in our groups, and then we'll come back and share a little bit in the final minutes. We'll see you real soon. Welcome back. Where is everybody? Oh, here they come. Welcome back, everyone. I know it's just a few minutes to chat about a very big topic, so probably just scratched the surface. We're not going to have time necessarily to unpack every group. So if your group especially had something you want to share, I'll give you the chance to have someone raise your hand and share that with us. Otherwise, I'll call on individual groups. Is there a group that wants to jump in with a comment or a thought? Okay, then I'm going to randomly pick room 1, which is Bruce Winters, Greg Snyder, Nancy Marcus, Rob Greenfield, Steve Sloan. A lot of shy people in that group. Anyone want to say something about this topic from group 1? Okay, yes, Rob.
Well, speaking for everyone, we had a great group, but being chosen implies you have a responsibility. If I was chosen to do something, so now what do I have to do to earn that? And so it implies responsibility, which would mean following the Torah and the 10 Commandments. So I think that's an important point. With respects to American exceptionalism, probably still, if you look at all the countries of the world, we are exceptional in our abilities to cherish freedom, to cherish democracy, and lead the world in trying to be equal, even though we've had so many blemishes against us as well. No one's perfect, but I think we do strive to have a better society in that sense. But I think we should be very careful how we use that word, exceptional. It's something to strive for.
Nice. Thank you, Rob. Anyone from room 2? David Zano, Ellen's iPad, Kathy Hayes, Marion Brett, Sandra Jackmack. Anyone from that group? Okay, moving right along. Room 3 was Beth, Betsy, Ellen, Linda, Margaret Gillison, Paul, which would not be Paul, would actually be Carrie. Ellen, the birthday girl. By the way, I got a message from another birthday person. You share a birthday with Martin Brower.
I knew that. Yeah, Martin and I are birthday buddies.
He turned 93, turns 93 today.
God bless him.
He sent an email. I sent him a birthday message this morning, and he responded that he's sad he missed Torah study. He says hi to everyone. He overslept. And you know what? At 93 on your birthday, sleep in. Enjoy some extra time cuddling in bed. All right, Ellen.
Ditto to the responsibility theme, and just the idea that that if to whom much is given, much is expected, and so as a result, we need to be role models. I think both as Jews and as Americans, because God knows that we are blessed in so many ways. So,
absolutely, thank you. So when we're starting to run out of time, we're probably not going to get to the other 2 groups, so apologies to the other 2 groups. This is one of those big meta topics that comes up every now and then. I'm sure we could all list the top 10 topics. This would be one of them for Jews to ponder. And I think what we're all wrestling with is that this notion of chosenness is a double-edged sword. It comes with responsibility. It comes with hatred that could emerge from outside. It could lead people to a sense of an unwarranted sense of superiority. But if, other than jettisoning this notion of chosenness, which say Mordechai Kaplan advocated and has emerged in Reconstructionist Judaism, perhaps we need to thread the needle in a way that allows us to understand this chosenness as a calling, as an aspiration. Just as Rob described the exceptionalism of the United States, there is much about the United States that is problematic historically, and even looking at some of the events of today. Yet the aspiration is that America stands for goodness and right. And so while that may not yet be perfected, it remains an aspiration. And as long as it's a self description, it's something that we have a hope of approaching. Similarly as Jews, if we regard ourselves as chosen in a way that reflects an undeserved superiority, then it's problematic. But if it is an inspiration to advance ourselves and advance the world, then maybe it's a topic and a way of looking at things that is worthy and worth holding on to. So, friends, in whatever way you feel chosen, may your chosenness inspire you and energize you to help make things better for those around you and the world around us. And given everything that's going on, we know that the world could use people fighting in that direction at home and abroad. So friends, wish you Shabbat Shalom. Reminded tonight, Slichot, asking for forgiveness for all kinds of things. As we kick off the High Holy Day period, 8 o'clock online, it's the Shabbat link. There, you can go to the website and link onto it. You could go to your emails and link onto it. It's going to be around 45 minutes, and it's going to conclude with a magnificent blowing of the shofar. Jessica, who's blowing the shofar this year for tonight?
Leo.
Leo's
Leo
blowing the
is very happy
shofar.
to do that. Yeah.
So-
My dogs have been listening to him practice for the last 2 days. So yeah, my neighbors have gotten used to the idea too.
Awesome. So hope to see you tonight. Enjoy your Shabbat. Rest up. See you later, guys.